Hey guys, welcome aboard to Just Sleep Stories. Tonight we're drifting into a world colder than the office air conditioner someone secretly sets to Arctic mode. We're travelling back to medieval Europe, where winter wasn't just a season, it was a personality. A rude one. The kind that barges into your house uninvited, steals your blankets, and then politely freezes your soup solid just to make a point. Now, before we begin our cosy journey into the frostbitten chaos of medieval peasant life, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy drifting off to mildly ridiculous history lessons like this one. And if you feel like it, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I always love seeing where the Snooze Voyager crew is scattered around the world. Some of you are tucked in under blankets, some are on night shifts, and a few brave souls are probably pretending to work while secretly learning about medieval frostbite. All right. Now dim the lights a little. Maybe turn on a fan for that gentle background hum. Get comfortable. Wiggle around until your pillow feels just right. Pull the blanket up like a medieval peasant who finally found something warmer than a damp sack. And let's think about this for a moment. Have you ever complained about your bedroom being a little cold? Maybe the heater took a while to kick in. Maybe you had to wear socks to bed like some kind of desperate winter survivor. But imagine trying to sleep when the inside of your house is only slightly warmer than the outside. Imagine waking up and discovering the water bucket has turned into a decorative ice sculpture overnight. Imagine sharing your bed not just with your spouse, but also with a goat, 2 chickens, and a cat that absolutely refuses to respect personal space. What did peasants actually do when winter arrived? How did they keep warm when fireplaces barely heated one corner of the room? What did they eat when fields were frozen solid? Did their clothes actually keep them warm? Or were they basically wrapped in slightly warmer versions of sadness? And perhaps the most important question of all, how did they survive nights so cold that even the rats were reconsidering their life choices? Well, congratulations! You've just woken up in the year 1347. Your house is made of wood, mud, and optimistic thinking. Your blanket is stuffed with straw. Your window is basically a hole with a wooden shutter. And outside, winter has arrived. Let's see how long you last. You wake slowly, mostly because moving too fast might remind your body that it's freezing. The first thing you notice is the cold. Not the polite kind of cold where you reach for a sweater. No, this is the kind of cold that has been quietly creeping through the walls all night like an uninvited ghost. Your breath forms small clouds in the dim morning air. Your nose is cold, your toes are cold, your soul is considering filing a complaint with the universe. This is your home, a medieval peasant cottage built from wood, mud, straw, and what historians might generously call hopeful architecture. The fire in the hearth died sometime during the night, because firewood is precious, and you can't exactly keep it burning like a luxury hotel fireplace. Your blanket is stuffed with straw that rustles every time you move, which sounds charming in theory, but feels suspiciously like sleeping on a sack of crunchy hay. You slowly peel back the blanket, immediately regretting every life decision that led to this moment. The air in the room feels like someone left the refrigerator door open all night. Medieval homes rarely stayed warm for long after the fire died. Without insulation, without sealed windows, and without the modern miracle known as central heating, the inside of your house politely matches whatever temperature the outside world has decided to be today, which unfortunately is winter. You sit up carefully on your straw mattress. The straw shifts and crackles beneath you, making a sound somewhere between dried leaves and a nervous squirrel. This mattress, known as a palliasse, is basically a large sack filled with straw or dried grass. It's cheap, easy to refill, and only mildly inhabited by insects. Over time the straw flattens, meaning you occasionally have to refill it, which is medieval code for wrestling with a pile of hay while trying not to sneeze. The room is dim. Light slips through small cracks in the wooden shutters that cover the window opening. Glass windows are still rare and expensive in most villages, so your window is less of a window and more of a polite suggestion that light should try its best. You swing your feet down to the floor. Big mistake. The packed earth floor greets your bare feet with the enthusiasm of frozen stone. You immediately pull them back up, reconsidering the concept of standing entirely. Medieval peasants often covered floors with rushes, dried plants scattered across the ground. These could help absorb moisture and dirt. They also occasionally hosted insects, crumbs, and whatever the family goat tracked in yesterday. You glance toward the hearth. The fire has faded to grey ash and a few shy red embers hiding beneath the soot. Last night's warmth is gone, and the room has settled into that quiet, frosty stillness that only medieval winter mornings can provide. From somewhere in the cottage you hear movement. A chicken clucks softly. Another rustle comes from the corner where a goat is shifting its weight, clearly unimpressed by the entire concept of mourning. Animals often slept inside peasant homes during winter months, not because anyone was particularly sentimental, but because animals produce heat, and heat is precious. Think of it as medieval central heating, but slightly louder and occasionally chewing on furniture. You pull your wool blanket around your shoulders and stand up slowly. The cold air wraps around you like an unfriendly hug. Every movement releases small puffs of breath that drift upward in the pale light. Outside, the village is still quiet. Snow or frost may cover the fields beyond your door. Winter mornings arrive slowly here. There are no alarm clocks, no glowing phone screens, just the slow grey arrival of dawn and the gentle reminder that today, like yesterday, will involve a great deal of surviving the cold. Congratulations, you have officially begun your medieval morning, and you haven't even left the bed yet. Let's take a moment to admire the structure currently failing to keep you warm. Your cottage is built using a common medieval technique known as wattle and daub. This method sounds almost poetic, like the name of a cosy bakery or a charming countryside pub. In reality, it means your house is essentially a carefully organized collection of sticks and mud. First, builders create a wooden frame. Thick beams form the skeleton of the structure. Between these beams, thin branches are woven together like a basket. This woven lattice is called the wattle. Then comes the daub. Daub is a mixture of mud, clay, straw, and animal manure. Yes, manure. It's mixed together and packed into the woven branches, where it dries into a surprisingly solid wall. It's cheap, readily available, and excellent at reminding you that medieval construction involved a very relaxed relationship with farm animals. To be fair, daub does provide some insulation. Straw helps trap air, and the thick mud blocks wind fairly well. Fairly well. Unfortunately, winter winds are ambitious little things. They find gaps. They squeeze through tiny cracks. They slide under doors and whisper through the thatch above your head. Your roof is made from bundles of straw known as thatch. Thatch is layered carefully so that rainwater runs off the roof instead of soaking through. When properly maintained, a thatched roof can last for years. However, it also provides excellent housing opportunities for mice, birds and insects who have decided your roof is now their cosy winter apartment complex. Occasionally you may hear faint scratching above your head at night. This is either a mouse or a slightly larger mouse. Either way, it has probably paid less rent than you. The door to your cottage is a simple wooden plank construction, hung on basic hinges. It doesn't seal tightly, which means cold air slips around the edges whenever winter decides to breathe in your direction. Your window openings are small, partly to reduce heat loss, partly because glass is expensive. In wealthier homes, thin panes of glass might be installed, but in a typical peasant cottage, windows are often covered with wooden shutters, cloth, or sometimes thin sheets of animal horn that allow light through. So your house receives light. But warmth? That's more of a group project involving the hearth, your clothing, and the goat. Inside, the cottage usually consists of one main room. Sometimes a loft space exists above, used for storage or sleeping. The central hearth sits on the floor or in a simple stone base, serving as the cooking area and the primary source of heat. Smoke from the fire drifts upward toward a hole in the roof or a primitive chimney. Sometimes it leaves efficiently. Sometimes it lingers in the room like it's waiting for an invitation, which is why medieval homes often carried a permanent scent of wood smoke. On the bright side, smoke helped repel insects and preserve wooden beams. On the less bright side, it also made your eyes water and your lungs question your life choices. But this cottage, drafty as it is, represents security. It protects you from wind, rain, and snow. It shelters your family and animals. It stores your food and tools. And when the winter wind howls outside across frozen fields, the thin walls and smoky hearth feel surprisingly comforting. Because at least you are inside, and the wind is not. Now let's properly examine the masterpiece you just climbed out of. Your bed, or more accurately, the general concept of a bed. Medieval peasants did not enjoy the luxury of memory foam, orthopedic support, or mattresses advertised by celebrities promising the best sleep of your life. Instead, most people slept on a palliasse, a sack filled with straw, dried grass, or sometimes leaves. It's simple, it's cheap, and if you fluff it occasionally, it's almost comfortable. Almost. The sack is usually made of rough linen or burlap-like fabric. Over time, the straw inside compresses, forming uneven lumps that encourage your spine to explore new and creative positions during the night. You might think the solution would be replacing the straw frequently. You would be correct. However, replacing straw requires time and effort, and peasants already have more chores than daylight hours, so mattresses are usually refreshed only when they become particularly crunchy. Another charming feature of straw bedding is its ability to host a lively ecosystem of tiny creatures. Fleas, lice, and the occasional beetle enjoy the warm, cozy environment created by human body heat. Medieval people were well aware of these tiny roommates. They simply accepted them as part of life, the way modern people accept spam emails and slow internet. Blankets, if you have them, are usually made of wool. Wool is one of the great heroes of medieval survival. Unlike cotton, wool retains warmth even when damp, which is extremely useful in homes where humidity, smoke, and cold air regularly mingle. Your blanket may be coarse, heavy, and slightly scratchy, but when winter winds blow outside, that wool blanket becomes your best friend. Beds are often shared, not out of romance, but practicality. Families commonly slept together for warmth. Parents, children, sometimes even extended family members shared sleeping space. Warm bodies helped retain heat through the night. Privacy was not exactly a medieval luxury. Your bed frame, if you're lucky enough to have one, might be a simple wooden platform. Some homes place mattresses directly on the floor or on raised wooden boards. Wealthier households sometimes used rope-supported bed frames, the origin of the phrase "sleep tight," referring to tightening the ropes beneath the mattress. But for you, tonight's arrangement is straw, wood, wool, and optimism. And honestly, after a long day of physical labour, most peasants fell asleep quickly regardless of comfort level. Exhaustion is a powerful mattress. As you settle back into the straw after a long day, the sounds of the cottage surround you. The fire crackles softly. Animals shift in their sleep. Wind whispers through the thatch. The straw beneath you rustles gently as you adjust your blanket. Is it luxurious? Not exactly, but it is warm enough. And after surviving another freezing medieval day, warm enough is perfect. If the cottage is your shelter, the hearth is your lifeline. At the centre of the room sits a small fireplace area, sometimes just a circle of stones on the floor, sometimes a slightly raised hearth built from brick or clay. This humble fire is responsible for nearly everything important in your daily life. Heat, cooking, light, and occasionally keeping the goat from trying to eat your socks. Without the hearth, winter survival becomes significantly more complicated. Firewood, however, is precious. Medieval forests often belonged to the local lord, and peasants were not always free to cut down trees whenever they pleased. Instead, they collected fallen branches, deadwood, and small twigs. Large logs were valuable and used carefully, so fires are managed with extreme attention. During the evening, you feed the flames carefully, allowing them to burn strong while cooking supper and warming the room. But once night arrives, you don't keep the fire roaring all night like a cosy fireplace in a ski lodge. Wood is too valuable for that. Instead, you allow the fire to settle into glowing embers. These embers provide a small amount of heat through the night and make it easier to restart the fire in the morning. Sometimes ashes are carefully spread over the embers to keep them alive longer, like tucking the fire in under a warm blanket. Smoke drifts upward from the hearth and escapes through a hole in the roof or through a simple chimney if your cottage is particularly advanced. This smoke performs several useful functions. It discourages insects, it helps dry the thatch and wooden beams, and it gently seasons every object in the house with the scent of campfire. Unfortunately, it also occasionally fills the room like an uninvited fog machine. Your eyes water slightly as the smoke curls toward the ceiling. But medieval people are used to this. A smoky house is simply the smell of home. Cooking happens directly over the fire using iron pots hung from hooks or simple tripods. Porridge, stew, and pottage simmer slowly as the flames crackle beneath them. The hearth becomes the centre of family life. People gather around it to cook, eat, sew, and talk. Animals wander near it for warmth. Children sit close enough to feel the heat but far enough away to avoid accidentally roasting their shoes. During the darkest winter evenings, the glow of the hearth creates a warm circle of light in the otherwise shadowy room. Outside, snow and wind rule the frozen fields. Inside, the fire burns softly, and in medieval winter, that little fire makes all the difference. Eventually you must face the unavoidable truth. You cannot spend the entire winter wrapped in your blanket pretending the outside world doesn't exist. So it's time to get dressed. Medieval peasant clothing follows one very important rule. Wear everything you own. Your first layer is a linen shirt. Linen, made from flax fibres, is relatively comfortable against the skin and absorbs moisture. Even in winter, physical labour can make you sweat, and linen helps prevent wool garments from becoming unpleasantly damp. Over the linen shirt comes a wool tunic. Wool is the true champion of medieval winter fashion. Thick, durable, and warm, wool traps air between its fibres, creating insulation that keeps body heat from escaping. Your tunic probably falls somewhere between your knees and your thighs, tied at the waist with a simple belt. Next come hose or wool leggings that cover your legs. These may be separate pieces tied to your clothing or wrapped around your legs in long strips of cloth. Your feet slide into leather shoes or boots if you're lucky enough to own them. Leather offers some protection from wet ground, though it is far from waterproof. Cold toes are simply part of the medieval experience. If the weather is particularly harsh, you wrap a wool cloak around your shoulders. Cloaks are versatile garments, acting as blankets, coats, and sometimes emergency sleeping gear when travelling. The cloak fastens at the neck with a simple brooch or cord. You now resemble a walking pile of wool, which is exactly the goal. Layers trap warmth, and warmth means survival. Gloves exist but are not always common among peasants, so your hands often face winter directly. Hats or hoods are more common, helping preserve body heat by covering the head and ears. Once fully dressed, you take a moment to move around the room. The layers shift and settle. Your clothing is heavy, slightly itchy, and not particularly stylish by modern standards, but it works. Outside, the winter wind waits patiently beyond your door. Inside, wrapped in linen and wool, you prepare to step out into the cold medieval morning. Fashion may not be your priority. Staying warm absolutely is. Let's talk about breakfast. Now, before your modern brain imagines toast, eggs, or something comforting that comes out of a toaster with friendly confidence, we need to gently adjust expectations. Your medieval breakfast is pottage. Yes, pottage. Pottage is the medieval world's most dependable meal. It is technically a stew, but that word might raise hopes that cannot be safely met. Pottage is a thick mixture of grains, vegetables, and occasionally meat, simmered slowly in a large pot that often lives near the hearth for days at a time. Think of it as the original slow cooker, except the recipe is less carefully measured ingredients and more whatever happened to exist nearby. You approach the hearth where the cooking pot still rests above yesterday's embers. The pot is blackened from years of smoke and fire, and it contains a mixture that has been gently reheating since sometime yesterday afternoon. Inside, barley and oats float among cabbage leaves and maybe a few carrots. If the household was particularly fortunate recently, there might even be a few small pieces of salted meat hiding inside like shy little treasures. But meat is rare. For most peasants, winter meals are mostly grain and vegetables that were stored during autumn. You stir the pot slowly with a wooden spoon. Steam rises gently, bringing with it the earthy smell of cabbage, grain, and smoke from the hearth. It's not glamorous, but it's warm, filling, and dependable, which in medieval winter is basically the definition of luxury. Pottage has another advantage. It's endlessly reusable. Each day, new ingredients can be added to the same pot. A handful of beans, a few chopped onions, maybe leftover vegetables from yesterday. The stew thickens over time, absorbing flavours from every ingredient that has passed through it like a historical memory soup. Historians sometimes call this perpetual stew, which sounds impressive until you realise the pot might have been simmering continuously for several days, or longer. You scoop a bowl using a simple wooden ladle. The bowl itself might be carved wood or pottery, slightly uneven but perfectly functional. Metal utensils exist but are expensive, so spoons are usually wood. You sit near the hearth and take a careful bite. It's warm, thick, hearty, and slightly smoky. Not bad, actually. Bread often accompanies the meal if there is any available. Medieval bread can be dense and dark, made from rye or barley, rather than the fluffy wheat bread modern bakeries produce. Sometimes the bread is hard enough that dipping it into the pottage is less of a culinary choice and more of a structural necessity. Coffee, of course, does not exist here. Tea is rare in most parts of medieval Europe. Your morning drink is usually small beer or ale, a weak alcoholic beverage that is safer to drink than untreated water. The brewing process kills harmful bacteria, making it a surprisingly practical breakfast beverage. Yes, you're drinking beer in the morning, but it is very weak beer. Think less Friday night celebration, and more slightly enthusiastic bread water. As you finish your bowl, warmth slowly spreads through your body. Outside, the winter air still waits patiently beyond the cottage door. But for a few moments, sitting beside the hearth with a full stomach and a warm bowl in your hands, things feel manageable, which in medieval winter counts as a very good start to the day. Now that breakfast is finished, you face the task that quietly controls your entire winter existence. Firewood. Without firewood, the hearth cannot burn. Without the hearth, the cottage becomes a very small refrigerator with livestock. So each day, someone must venture out to collect more wood. You wrap your cloak tightly around your shoulders and push open the cottage door. Cold air rushes inside like it has been waiting all morning for this exact opportunity. Outside, the village lies under a pale winter sky. Frost coats the ground, turning grass into delicate white crystals that crunch softly beneath your boots. The forest stands not far beyond the fields, a dark line of bare branches against the grey sky. That forest is both a blessing and a carefully regulated resource. In medieval society, large forests often belong to the local lord. Peasants are sometimes allowed to collect fallen wood, branches, twigs, and dead limbs, but cutting down healthy trees without permission could bring serious trouble. Which means your firewood collection strategy involves a lot of walking and a lot of bending over. You step carefully along narrow paths toward the trees, scanning the ground for fallen branches. The wind has been generous lately, scattering sticks and limbs across the forest floor like nature's version of a messy living room. Each piece matters. You gather small branches first, snapping them into manageable lengths. Your fingers quickly grow stiff from the cold. Even through wool sleeves, winter has a way of finding your skin. The forest is quiet. No buzzing insects. No birds singing loudly. Just the occasional creak of branches and the soft crunch of frozen leaves beneath your feet. Eventually you find a thicker limb that must have fallen during a storm. Perfect. You drag it toward a tree stump and begin breaking it into smaller sections. Without modern tools, this work takes time. Some households own small axes, but many rely simply on leverage and patience. Bundle by bundle, you gather enough wood to last the day. You tie the branches together with rope or cloth and lift the bundle onto your shoulder. This is the moment when medieval winter exercise truly begins. The bundle is heavier than it looks. The walk back to the village feels longer than it did earlier. Cold air bites at your face while the wood presses against your back. But this effort will soon become warmth. When you return to the cottage, the animals stir as you step inside. The goat raises its head, judging you silently. You drop the bundle near the hearth with a satisfying thud. Later, these branches will feed the fire that warms the room, cooks your food, and keeps the cold from claiming the entire house. So while collecting firewood may be tiring, it is also the most important chore of the day, because every stick you gathered today is another hour of warmth tonight. Now that you're back inside the cottage, it's time to address something modern people might find slightly surprising. You do not live alone, not really. Your housemates include chickens, a goat, and possibly a pig that believes very strongly in personal freedom. This arrangement might sound chaotic, but it actually makes perfect sense in medieval winter. Animals produce heat. Quite a lot of it, in fact. When outside temperatures drop well below comfortable levels, bringing animals indoors helps keep them alive and keeps the house slightly warmer. Think of it as medieval climate control, powered entirely by hooves and feathers. In many peasant cottages, animals are kept in a small section of the main room, sometimes separated by a low wooden barrier. This keeps them nearby without allowing them complete control of the furniture. Most of the time, chickens wander around freely, clucking softly as they explore the room. They peck at stray crumbs, inspect the floor for edible mysteries, and occasionally attempt to sit in places that were not designed for chickens. The goat is slightly more opinionated. Goats possess a natural curiosity that medieval furniture finds deeply inconvenient. Anything within chewing distance is immediately evaluated as a potential snack. Shoes, cloth, wooden tools, your sleeve, all fair game. The pig, if present, is both intelligent and determined. Pigs are excellent at finding food, which is helpful when kitchen scraps need disposal. Unfortunately, pigs are also excellent at creating chaos, but despite the occasional mess, these animals are incredibly valuable. Chickens provide eggs, goats provide milk, pigs provide meat when the time eventually comes, and all of them contribute body heat to the cottage. On especially cold nights, that shared warmth can make a noticeable difference. Of course, this arrangement also introduces certain aromas. The combined scents of animals, smoke, damp wool, and cooking stew create a fragrance that historians might politely describe as authentic. You sit near the hearth while the animals settle into their corners. A chicken hops onto a low beam. The goat folds its legs beneath itself. The pig snorts quietly as it curls up in the straw. Outside, winter winds sweep across frozen fields. Inside, the cottage hums with quiet life. Warm breath, soft rustling, the gentle sounds of animals settling for the evening. It may not be peaceful in the modern sense, but it is warm, and warmth in medieval winter is everything. Now let's talk about something you probably take for granted every single day: water. In your modern life, water appears almost magically when you turn a tap. It arrives warm, cold, filtered, and politely pressurized. In medieval winter, water requires effort, and sometimes a small battle with ice. Your household stores water in wooden buckets or clay jugs, usually filled from the village well or a nearby stream. During warmer seasons, this process is merely inconvenient, but winter changes everything. You wake up one morning and discover the water bucket near the door has frozen solid overnight. Congratulations. Your drinking water is now an ice sculpture. This means someone must go outside and collect more. You wrap your cloak around yourself and step into the cold morning air again. The well stands near the centre of the village, surrounded by frozen ground and quiet cottages. Other villagers are already there, stamping their feet to stay warm while waiting their turn. Drawing water in winter requires patience. The well rope is stiff with frost. The bucket descends slowly into the darkness below, where the water remains liquid beneath the ice. You haul the bucket back up carefully. The rope bites into your hands as you lift, and small crystals of frost fall away as it moves. Finally, the bucket emerges. Water sloshes gently inside, dark and cold. You pour it into your container, careful not to spill too much. Every drop matters, because carrying water through snow and ice is not a hobby anyone enjoys repeating. Then comes the walk back. The bucket is heavy, the path is slippery, and cold wind insists on blowing directly into your face. When you return to the cottage, you place the bucket near the hearth. The warmth of the fire will help keep it from freezing again. Eventually. Until then, you now possess one bucket of water that must serve many purposes: drinking, cooking, cleaning, and possibly washing your face if you're feeling unusually ambitious. You dip a small cup into the bucket and take a sip. It is cold, extremely cold, but it is fresh. And in the frozen quiet of medieval winter, that simple bucket of water represents a small victory against the cold. You might think winter would be a time of rest. After all, the fields are frozen, crops are not growing, the long harvest days of autumn are behind you. Surely winter means relaxation, unfortunately. Medieval life does not include snow days. Even though farming slows during winter, the list of daily tasks remains surprisingly long. Animals still need feeding. Firewood must be gathered constantly. Tools need repair. Clothing must be patched, food stores must be carefully managed, and the house itself requires constant attention to keep cold air from invading every corner. You step outside once again, this time to check the small animals shed near the cottage. Livestock that do not live inside still require food and water each day. Hay gathered during summer now becomes precious fuel for survival. You carry armfuls of it across the yard, spreading it for the animals while your breath fogs the air around you. The cold creeps through your boots as you work. Your fingers sting, but work continues. Back inside, the next task might involve repairing tools. Wooden handles crack in cold weather, iron tools rust easily, and every item must last as long as possible. You sit near the hearth with a knife and a piece of wood, carefully smoothing a new handle for a farming tool that will be needed again when spring arrives. Nearby, someone mends clothing. Another person sorts dried beans or grain. Children help by carrying small bundles of sticks for the fire. Winter work is slower than summer labour, but it never truly stops. The rhythm of the household continues from morning to evening. Outside, snow drifts quietly across empty fields. Inside, hands remain busy. Because in medieval life, survival is a full-time job, even in winter. Evening settles slowly over the village, and with it comes one of the quiet rituals of medieval winter life. Mending. You sit near the hearth where the fire crackles softly, sending warm light dancing across the smoky beams of the cottage. The daylight outside has faded into a grey blur, and the cold presses gently against the walls. But inside, close to the fire, there is just enough warmth to keep your fingers working. In your hands is a wool tunic that has seen better days. Actually, that may be an understatement. The elbows are worn thin. One sleeve has a tear that probably began during wood gathering 2 weeks ago. The hem is fraying slightly from months of walking through mud, straw, and whatever mysterious substances medieval farmyards tend to accumulate. But replacing clothing is expensive, so instead, you repair it. You thread a needle carefully, squinting in the dim light. Needles are precious tools, often made from iron or bone, and losing one inside the rush-covered floor would be the medieval equivalent of dropping your phone into the ocean. The thread might be wool or linen twisted tightly so it holds strong through repeated use. You begin stitching, slowly, carefully. Your fingers move with practiced rhythm. Pull the thread through, tighten the seam, repeat. The firelight flickers against the needle, making tiny reflections that dance across the fabric. Around you, the cottage hums with quiet evening activity. Someone stirs the pot hanging over the hearth. A child shifts in the corner where straw bedding waits. The goat exhales loudly in its sleep, clearly unimpressed by the entire concept of sewing. You continue repairing the tunic, reinforcing the torn sleeve with a patch cut from an older piece of cloth. Nothing goes to waste here. Old garments become patches, patches become cleaning cloths, and cleaning cloths eventually become kindling. Medieval recycling was extremely efficient. Occasionally you pause to warm your hands closer to the fire. The wool smells faintly of smoke and winter air, and the thread slides through the cloth with a quiet whispering sound. Mending clothes is not glamorous work, but it is peaceful. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters. Inside, the fire glows softly. Each stitch extends the life of the garment just a little longer. Another season, perhaps. Another winter. And when the tunic is finally finished, you hold it up to the firelight and inspect your work. Not perfect, but strong, which in medieval life is exactly what matters most. Let's talk about something historians rarely include in paintings: the smell. Because while medieval cottages might look charming in artwork, the reality was a full sensory experience, especially during winter. Inside your home, several powerful aromas have decided to live together permanently. First, there is smoke. The hearth burns nearly every day, and even with a chimney or roof opening, smoke has a habit of lingering. It curls into the wooden beams, settles into clothing, and gently perfumes everything you own. Your cloak smells like smoke. Your hair smells like smoke. If medieval people had perfume advertisements, they would probably be called Essence of Fireplace. Then there are the animals. Remember those chickens and goats sharing the cottage? They bring warmth, companionship, and a distinct barnyard fragrance that politely refuses to leave. The pig, if present, contributes its own interpretation of indoor atmosphere. Add to that damp wool drying near the hearth, wet boots, straw on the floor, and the faint but persistent aroma of cabbage pottage simmering gently over the fire. Together these elements combine into a scent profile that modern noses might find intense. But medieval people are used to it. In fact, after spending enough time in this environment, the smell becomes normal. Your brain politely adjusts, the same way modern people stop noticing the smell of their own house. Visitors, however, might experience a slightly different reaction. Of course, winter actually makes things somewhat better. Cold air outside slows the spread of certain odours, and smoke from the hearth helps keep insects away. In summer months, when heat and animals combine forces, the fragrant situation becomes considerably more adventurous. Still, winter cottages hold their own unique atmosphere. You sit by the fire while steam rises from damp clothing hung on wooden pegs nearby. The scent of smoke mixes with the earthy smell of straw and the comforting aroma of warm stew. The fire crackles, a log shifts and pops. The goat snorts quietly. It may not smell like lavender fields or fresh linen sheets, but there is something strangely comforting about it. Because that smell means warmth. It means shelter. It means a roof overhead and food in the pot. And when winter winds howl outside across frozen fields, that smoky, slightly chaotic scent is the smell of survival. As evening deepens, the cottage grows darker, very quickly. Unlike modern homes filled with electric lights and glowing screens, medieval evenings rely entirely on fire and flame. Once the sun disappears below the horizon, darkness arrives like a heavy curtain dropping across the village. Inside your cottage, the hearth provides the main source of light. The flames flicker and dance, casting long shadows that stretch across the walls and ceiling beams. The glow is warm but limited. Step too far from the fire and the room fades quickly into dimness, which means most evening activities happen very close to the hearth, but sometimes additional light is needed. That's where rushlights come in. Rushlights are simple but clever little inventions. They are made from the dried pith of rush plants, which grow near marshy areas. The rush stem is peeled and dried, then dipped in melted animal fat. Once lit, the rush burns slowly, creating a small but steady flame. You place the rushlight in a simple metal holder, or wedge it into a crack in the wooden table. The flame flickers softly, casting a narrow circle of light across the room. It is not particularly bright. Reading by rushlight would be challenging, but for sewing, eating, or telling stories it works well enough. Candles also exist, though they are more expensive. Wealthier households might use candles made from beeswax or tallow. Beeswax candles burn cleaner and brighter, while tallow candles made from animal fat sometimes produce a smell that could politely be described as enthusiastic. So rushlights remain the practical choice for most peasants. You watch the flame flicker gently, its light reflecting off the iron cooking pot and the wooden table nearby. Outside, darkness has completely claimed the village. No streetlights, no glowing windows across the countryside, just the quiet, vast darkness of medieval night. Inside the cottage, however, the fire and rushlight create a warm island of light. The room glows softly. Shadows stretch lazily across the walls, and in that quiet, flickering light, evening life continues calmly, while the cold waits patiently outside. Winter in the medieval world brings more than just cold. It also brings illness. You sit near the hearth, rubbing your hands together while someone nearby coughs quietly. The sound echoes slightly in the small cottage, reminding everyone that sickness can spread easily during the colder months. When people spend long hours indoors together, sharing warmth and air, illnesses travel quickly. Colds, fevers, persistent coughs, sometimes something worse. Medical knowledge during the medieval period is developing. Physicians exist in towns and cities, but most villagers rely on local remedies passed down through generations. Herbs play an important role. Bundles of dried plants hang from the rafters, collected during warmer seasons and stored carefully for winter use. Thyme, sage, mint, and other herbs may be brewed into teas or crushed into mixtures believed to ease coughs and fevers. Some remedies involve warm broth, others involve poultices made from herbs and cloth placed on the chest or forehead, and occasionally treatments involve advice that modern medicine would describe as creative. Still, many of these herbal remedies genuinely helped. Warm liquids soothed sore throats. Certain herbs contained mild medicinal properties that eased symptoms. But serious illness remained dangerous. Without antibiotics or advanced treatments, infections could linger and worsen. That is why warmth, food, and rest were considered essential parts of healing. The hearth becomes even more important during these times. Its warmth comforts the sick. Its light fills the room with gentle reassurance. Someone stirs the stew pot again, preparing warm broth for whoever needs it most. You watch the flames carefully, listening to the quiet sounds of the cottage around you. Illness is a constant shadow in medieval life, but communities face it together. Neighbours help when families struggle, food is shared, herbs are offered, and the fire continues burning softly while winter passes slowly outside. Winter meals rely heavily on one important strategy: preservation. When autumn harvest ends, families store as much food as possible to survive the long cold months ahead. Fresh vegetables become rare, and fields remain frozen until spring, so the food you eat now was prepared months ago. In the corner of the cottage stand sacks of grain, barley, oats, maybe rye if the harvest was good. These grains form the foundation of many meals. They can be boiled into porridge, ground into flour, or added to pottage for extra thickness. Nearby hang strings of dried onions and garlic. Root vegetables like turnips, carrots, and parsnips are stored in cool cellars or buried in pits outside to keep them from freezing. Cabbage is especially important. It stores well, can be fermented into sauerkraut, and appears in winter meals with enthusiastic frequency. If the household preserved meat earlier in the year, salted pork or beef may hang from rafters or rest in storage barrels. Salt draws moisture out of the meat, preventing spoilage. Before cooking, salted meat must often be soaked in water to remove excess salt. Otherwise, dinner might taste like the ocean. Beans and peas also play a major role in winter diets. Dried legumes last for months and provide valuable protein when fresh meat is scarce. You open a sack and scoop a handful into the pot. They will soften slowly as they cook over the fire. Meals remain simple but nourishing. Stews, porridge, bread when flour is available, sometimes cheese made earlier in the year. Every ingredient has been carefully stored and rationed to last until spring. Nothing is wasted. As you sit near the hearth with a bowl of steaming pottage, you appreciate the quiet planning that made this meal possible. Months ago, during warmer days, seeds were planted. Crops were harvested, food was dried, salted and stored, all so that now, in the heart of winter, there is still something warm in the pot. The day slowly winds down, and winter darkness settles over the village like a thick wool blanket. Outside, the fields are silent under frost, and the wind drifts lazily through the bare branches of nearby trees. Inside the cottage, however, the hearth burns steadily, casting warm orange light across the room. This is the moment when the work finally pauses, and when the stories begin. You settle near the fire with the rest of the household. The heat from the flames warms your boots while shadows dance across the walls. Someone nudges another piece of firewood into the hearth, and sparks drift upward like tiny stars before disappearing into the smoke. Evening storytelling is one of the great comforts of medieval winter. With daylight gone and chores finished for the moment, families gather around the fire to talk, remember, and entertain one another. There are no books in most peasant homes, and certainly no glowing screens asking if you're still watching, so people tell stories, lots of them. Sometimes the stories are practical. Tales about last year's harvest, about the neighbour's cow that somehow wandered into the churchyard, or about a travelling merchant who once visited the village and tried to sell everyone something suspiciously labelled miracle medicine. But many stories drift into something more imaginative. Old legends, strange creatures said to live in deep forests, heroes who battled giants or outwitted greedy kings. Some stories are funny, others are meant to teach lessons. A few are designed specifically to make children behave, particularly the ones involving mysterious creatures that wander through villages looking for kids who refuse to go to bed. You listen while someone older begins telling a familiar tale. Their voice rises and falls slowly, almost like the rhythm of the wind outside. Everyone leans a little closer to the fire. The goat lifts its head briefly, perhaps wondering if it has somehow become part of the story. Children sit quietly, eyes wide as the tale unfolds. Even the adults smile occasionally, because these stories have been told many times before. But that's part of the charm. Stories in medieval villages are shared memory. They travel from one generation to the next, carried by voices instead of ink. Sometimes laughter breaks out. Someone interrupts to correct a detail. Another person insists the story happened differently, and so the tale grows larger each time it is told. Outside, the cold night deepens. But inside the cottage, the warmth of the fire and the gentle rhythm of storytelling create something surprisingly peaceful. Because even in the harshest winters, people still find ways to laugh. Now that the stories have begun flowing, it's only a matter of time before the conversation wanders into more mysterious territory. Superstitions. Medieval people lived in a world where science had not yet explained many of the strange things that happened around them. Illness, storms, strange lights in the sky, all of these could easily be interpreted as signs of something supernatural. And winter nights were particularly good at encouraging these ideas. You glance toward the shuttered window as the wind rattles it softly. Outside, the darkness is deep and quiet. The village paths are empty, and the fields stretch into blackness beyond the reach of firelight. It is exactly the sort of night when people begin whispering about spirits. Someone near the fire leans closer and lowers their voice slightly. They mention the old story about wandering souls. According to village tradition, certain winter nights allow spirits to move more freely through the world. Cold winds are sometimes said to carry the voices of the dead, and strange noises in the forest might not always belong to animals. You listen quietly. Even if you do not fully believe these stories, there is something about winter darkness that makes them feel possible. Another villager mentions the Wild Hunt, a legend told in many parts of medieval Europe. It describes ghostly riders racing across the sky during stormy nights, led by a mysterious hunter. Seeing the hunt was said to be an omen of great change or disaster. Of course, most of these tales likely grew from misunderstandings. Wind through trees can create strange sounds. Owls call from the darkness. Branches crack beneath the weight of snow. But when you live in a world lit only by fire and moonlight, the imagination fills the gaps very easily. Children listen with a mixture of excitement and nervous curiosity. Adults pretend not to be impressed, but everyone glances toward the door once in a while, just in case something unusual happens to wander past. Eventually someone chuckles and shakes their head, dismissing the stories as old village nonsense. Still, nobody rushes to open the door and check the darkness outside just to be safe. Winter is difficult. There's no polite way to describe it. The cold lasts for months. Food must be carefully rationed. Firewood disappears faster than anyone would prefer. Illness spreads easily, and the long nights can make the world feel very small. Which is why the village community matters so much. You step outside the cottage the next morning and notice small signs of cooperation everywhere. A neighbour carries a bundle of firewood toward an elderly villager's house. Two men work together repairing a broken fence that collapsed under snow. Children run between cottages carrying small baskets of food from one household to another. In medieval villages, survival often depends on people helping one another. If one family's harvest was poor, neighbours might share grain. If someone becomes ill, others step in to help with chores. When heavy snow blocks paths or damages buildings, the village gathers to clear debris and repair structures. No official schedule organises these tasks. People simply understand that working together improves everyone's chances of surviving the season. You greet a neighbour as they pass by. Their cloak is wrapped tightly around their shoulders, and their breath drifts in white clouds through the cold air. They nod and mention the weather. Winter conversations are often very focused on the weather, because the weather controls everything. If temperatures drop too far, water sources freeze. If snow falls too heavily, travel becomes dangerous. If storms damage homes, entire families may struggle. But shared effort makes these challenges easier to face. Later in the day, several villagers gather to split firewood together. Axes rise and fall slowly while people talk about the coming spring. There is comfort in these routines. You realize that although medieval life can be harsh, it is rarely lonely. Because the village itself becomes an extended family. And during winter, that family makes all the difference. Let's imagine for a moment that you decide to travel somewhere during winter. Perhaps you need to visit a nearby village. Maybe you must deliver a message or trade goods. Whatever the reason, the journey will not be simple. You step onto the narrow dirt road that winds away from the village. In summer, this road is uneven but manageable. Wagons leave deep ruts in the soil, and travellers walk carefully to avoid twisting ankles. In winter, however, the road becomes something entirely different. Snow covers the ground unevenly, hiding holes and stones beneath its soft surface. In other places, melted snow has frozen overnight into slick sheets of ice that seem specifically designed to challenge your balance. You walk slowly. Each step must be placed carefully. Your boots crunch through frozen patches while cold wind drifts across the fields. Travel during winter is rarely fast. Carts move slowly to avoid sliding off narrow roads. Horses struggle with icy ground. Rivers that normally serve as travel routes may freeze partially, creating unpredictable hazards. Many villagers simply avoid travelling whenever possible. Long journeys are postponed until spring. Messengers and traders still move between towns, but they prepare carefully, carrying extra supplies and warm clothing. You pass another traveller walking in the opposite direction. They nod politely but continue moving without stopping long. Conversations are shorter in winter. Everyone wants to reach their destination before darkness falls, because winter nights arrive quickly, and travelling after sunset without modern lighting can be dangerous. Eventually you reach a small rise in the road and look back toward your village. Thin trails of smoke rise from cottage roofs. The sight is reassuring, because each small column of smoke means someone has a fire burning, someone is warm, and someone has made it through another winter day. The fire has burned low now. The cottage is quiet. The goat has finally stopped rearranging the straw like an interior decorator with questionable taste. The chickens are tucked somewhere in the shadows. Even the wind outside seems to have grown tired of rattling the shutters. And after everything you've done today, you're ready to rest. You woke in a frozen cottage with breath fogging the air. You dressed in layers of wool that would make a walking blanket jealous. You ate a breakfast of pottage that had probably been simmering longer than some medieval friendships. You gathered firewood in the cold forest. You carried water that fought very hard to become ice. You shared your home with animals who doubled as heating systems. You patched your clothes by firelight, listened to stories, and heard whispers of ghosts riding through winter skies. You watched neighbours help one another. You heard church bells ring across frozen fields. And slowly, quietly, you made it through another winter day in the medieval world. Not comfortably, not easily, but successfully. Because that's the remarkable thing about the people who lived through these times. They endured things that would make modern life feel like a luxury spa weekend. Cold homes, hard beds, food that required creativity and patience, long nights lit only by fire and hope, and yet they laughed around the hearth. They told stories, they shared food and helped neighbours survive the season. History often looks harsh when we examine it closely, but it is also proof of something incredibly human. People are stubborn, resilient, and surprisingly good at adapting to uncomfortable situations, especially when goats are involved. So tonight, as you lie in your warm bed with soft blankets, insulated walls, and a heater that doesn't require chopping wood in a frozen forest, you might take a quiet moment to appreciate those small comforts. Hot showers, electric lights, windows that actually keep the wind outside. Because your ancestors survived winters that would have tested anyone's patience, and they did it with straw mattresses, smoky fires, and a bowl of cabbage stew. Which is honestly very impressive. Now the fire is nearly out. The cottage grows darker. Outside, the cold night stretches across the silent fields, while inside the last embers glow softly in the hearth. You pull the blanket a little closer. Your breathing slows. The sounds of the village fade into the quiet rhythm of the night. And somewhere in the distance the winter wind drifts lazily through the trees, while you drift gently into sleep.